Hello, good morning, everyone, and sorry for the session starting a bit late, but I gather since all of you seems to have traveled from Pune, you must have got some time to at least grab a cup of coffee and be ready for the session. So it's very, very interesting. So just as a background about myself, my name is G.V. Prasad. Uh, been now in the corporate space for about 3 decades, so it seems like ages back. Been experienced in the GCC world for last 20, 25 years. And presently, I'm involved with my own venture called Shinken. Interestingly, I think a few weeks back when the World HRD Congress reached out to me about the topic around leadership and agile leadership in the phase of change, it sort of resonated immediately. And I said, I'll love to come and share my perspectives around it, just because I genuinely believe that the need for good leadership is much more than it was ever in the past. And not that leadership was not required earlier, but I think we were operating in a relatively stable environment when it came to corporate life. When you look at organizations, there were from time to time a few changes here and there, but never ever was the change like a tsunami that we are experiencing at this point of time. So if you look at what's happening around us, and I'm sure each one of you and many of you, when you're going to enter the corporate world, you'll probably see even more drastic changes than what exists today. I think there are 4 things which are interplaying at the same time. First and foremost, I think when it comes to global capability centers, as you know, GCCs are nothing but there are parent organizations like JP Morgan, organizations like Goldman Sachs, and so on, who have decided to use India as a very, very sound base to operate their processes, operate their services, so that they can get good advantage from the workforce that exists over here. But slowly and steadily, at this point of time, the expectations from what the India centers and India organization needs to do is undergoing a very, very drastic change in itself, basically. So that's one thing which is changing. Along with that, there's a big change when it comes to technology. I think all of us have been reading, all of us have been hearing about AI. At times we might feel it has probably become a buzzword, it's probably more glorified than what it needs to be. But the reality is that the technology change and changes with disruptive technologies like AI is a reality. It's already going on and it will only gather momentum as we go along. So when it comes to a lot of jobs that we are doing today, they will undergo a huge transformation. By the time you guys will pass out, and they're actually undergoing huge transformation practically every month, every second month or so, be it in the space of operations, be it in the space of HR, be it in the space of finance, so on and so forth. So that's a big change which is also happening at the same time. The third thing is around, I think, the employees themselves. You all belong to now a relatively young workforce which is going to get into the corporate life very, very soon. And I think the leaders of GCCs have to understand how to work to make sure that each one of you feels very well an integral part of the organization that you join, and more importantly, you're able to deliver to your best capability, basically. And then, needless to say, the geopolitical situations, they're undergoing changes. You know, there's a joke at times to say that if Trump sneezes in US, things change over here overnight. You know, so you never know what's going to happen. Obviously, this is one specific country, but there are things which are changing across. And that's why the nature of work that is being carried out in India is undergoing a big, big shift and will undergo a big shift going forward as well, just because of the geopolitical situations, because of the regulatory requirements which is changing, because of the expectations which are changing. So for the first time, I think corporate India is experiencing these 4 changes coming together. And that's the reason why it's probably tsunami of change as compared to small, gradual, incremental change. And these changes are for the good. These changes are going to make things more efficient. These changes are going to make the end customer, irrespective of where they're consuming the services or the products, become much, much more reliable and efficient. But at the same time, the leadership has to gain and leadership has to be ready to sort of take care of these particular changes. So that's the reason why I think the change management and leadership in today's world is becoming a more critical topic than it was ever in the past. So what exactly is agile leadership? It's very easy to say that people should be agile, leadership should be great, and so on and so forth. I think agile leadership can mean different things to different people. But based on my own personal experience and a bit of learning and readings and other things that I've been doing around, I think there are, again, probably four main pillars of what agile leadership basically means. First and foremost, I think it's about how you are developing yourself as an individual and how are you developing the teams that are with you as a leader. The reason being that, again, the days when a leader would say, I know it all, I don't need to learn any longer because I have now had an experience of 15 years, 20 years, so on and so forth, I think those days are gone. I'm very, very sure that leaders who are working for last maybe even 20 years never heard of AI till about a year and a half back. So a lot of things are changing, whether it's again on technology side or whether it's on other scenarios. And therefore, having a mindset where you are constantly as a leader learning and you're providing a right ecosystem to your organization so that people can learn and people can keep reinventing themselves very well is what is critical. So that's one aspect of what agile leadership basically means. The other aspect is about how decisions are taken. Because of the fact that the environment is changing very, very fast, some of the conventional ways of how some of the organizations take decisions, and this might be a bit difficult for you to correlate unless some of you have been in the corporate world earlier. The conventional way of how decisions are generally taken in organizations is that there is a lot of information that gets gathered, there is decisions based on a lot of data, and then at times it takes time to take decisions because you are wanting to be sure that whatever decision you take, you're going to be living with that decision for years to come. I think now the scenario is changing. Whatever decisions you take probably will not need to last for years to come because the environment around you is changing very, very drastically. So I think there's a need, or agile leadership is going to be all about how can you take decisions faster. You may not necessarily have all the information that you probably had the luxury of having earlier, but can you still take good calculated decisions based on whatever is available to you so that the speed of decision making is in line with the speed of change. And that doesn't mean that one is reckless, but at the same time one is able to do it in a more efficient manner. So that's the other aspect of what typically agile leadership would mean. It's about decision making. The third is about how do you deal with your workforce. I think we keep hearing a lot of it, and obviously many of you are part of the Gen Z and all the things that we've spoken about. I think the way earlier the staff used to be handled was very, very different. The leader would walk into the room, leader would tell them what to do, leader would probably have answers for majority of the questions, or at least believe that they had answers for a lot of questions, and expect the people to just follow what is being said. I think now that's changing. I think young folks like all of you, when you get into corporate life, you want to be in a position where you are actually contributing. You want to be in a position where there is a good iterative process of you being able to give your viewpoints, and where probably the leaders are working with you to try and see what's best possible in any which manner, basically. So this whole aspect of how people are managed or how teams are managed is already undergoing a change, and I think it's going to even go further changes for two reasons, because that's the expectations of people who are joining organizations, but at the same time, since the environment is changing around one, so therefore people are trying to, the more think tanks are put in place, the better it is in order to arrive at the right type of solutions and things like that. And then the final thing, which is probably very, very critical, is how the global leadership is sort of looked into. So many a times, as I stated, when you look at some of the leading GCCs in India, be it JP Morgan, I was part of AXA, which is a global insurance giant, and so on. Initially, the journey in India started with the fact that they were very happy that you can set up a center in India, you get 50-60% advantage in your costs, so you save a lot of costs, and at the same time, they tell what to do, and you do it. I think now it's about communication. The more the Indian entities are able to communicate to their global players or global parent companies, that can be in Europe, could be in US, wherever, I think the better it is. So agile leadership is a lot about seeing what's happening on the ground, and communicating that with the global leadership and everybody around you, so that once again, whatever you need to do to run your business in an efficient manner is something that can be dealt with in a proper manner. So that's what agile leadership is all about. It could mean a lot of other things, but broadly, it's about, just to do a quick recap on that front, it's about how you develop yourself and how do you develop your teams. So do you have the process of continuous improvement, and you do have a mindset of continuous learning? It's all about how do you manage communication in an effective manner and a timely manner. It's about decision making, where at times you may not have luxury of too much of information, but based on whatever information is available to you, how fast and how effectively are you able to take those decisions and move forward. And it's a lot about how do you work with people. How do you ensure that the synergies are there? So I think I was talking to a group of you before the session, and I was saying that it's great. MBAs even till today have their specializations, like you specialize in HR and marketing and probably operations and supply chain management and so on and so forth. But honestly, I think those lines are getting blurred. No longer can you say, oh, I am an HR person. I don't really care about what's happening on the technology front. You will need to know that. Or you might say, I'm the marketing guy, I don't really care what's happening in HR or somewhere else. So I think those lines between different functions are blurring, just because the way the technology is evolving and the way the consumer requirements are evolving, it requires a good synergistic working between these different functions altogether. So that's a reason why you need to come up with a mindset to say, okay, specialize in whatever domain is close to your heart, but be flexible and be ready with the aspect of trying to work in a synergistic manner, basically. So that's what agile leadership is all about. So how does one become agile? I guess there is no specific mantra as such, but there are a few things that can really work in a very effective manner. Firstly, it's about, as I said, how do you really develop yourself? So is there a process of continuous learning? So whether you are a leader or whether you are in an organization, is the organization providing you with the right infrastructure? There are beautiful applications these days. There are beautiful ways where you can learn how to develop yourself without even having to interact with anyone. Whether it is on getting basic tutorial on what AI is all about, to leadership lessons, training, simulation models, and everything around it. So I think it's very important that if organizations and if the leaders in GCC, or for that matter of fact in any business, want to develop themselves and develop their teams, they need to provide that particular ecosystem. And I know many of you are probably in the first year, but whenever you go out into the real world and you're making selections for the corporates that you need to join, besides obviously the things about how much they're going to pay you and so on and so forth, it's important to understand what is the ecosystem in terms of enabling you to learn more. Because organizations which believe in that are probably organizations from where you'll benefit the most, especially when you're starting your career in a manner. The other thing is develop the habit of communicating. Develop the habit of telling a story around, and story not a fictitious story, but telling a story around why change is required. Because many a times people may not necessarily believe why change is required, because they feel everything around them seems to be the same. But in reality, a lot of changes are happening. So the more the leaders, or for that matter of fact, the team members, can develop the capability of communicating effectively, could be with your peers, could be with your supervisors, could be with the global partner that you are having sitting in the US or Europe or wherever they might be, the better it would be. Because the more you're able to articulate and get ability to do that, the more effective it is. So I think in order to become agile, it's very critical to end up having that ability and getting those particular learnings going. Then it's around decentralizing the decision-making process. So again, as I stated, there were days when it would be the responsibility of a handful of leaders to decide, tell, and then others are implementing. I don't think now any leader can ever boast about the fact that they know it all, because things around them are changing. It's not a question of their capability. It's a question of the environment around them which is undergoing a change. So if you can, as an organization, provide the ability where the decisions can be taken, not all decisions, but day-to-day decisions and so on, of how effectively to run your services or operations and so on, with people who are closest to the process and closest to the work they're doing, the better it would be. So I think organizations have already started working in that direction, where some of the decision making is getting a sort of decentralized in a manner where it gets done with the respective functions rather than again just a handful of individuals wanting to take all the decisions. Obviously there'll be some decisions which are always going to be done only by a few key leaders because they are very, very strategic in nature or have far reaching implications when it comes to the workforce and so on. So I think it's about how, again, people can be trained and mentored, and leaders themselves can do things around how decision making is done. And the more they can do on that particular front, the better and effective it's going to be. And finally, it's going to be about the ecosystem. So if you really want an agile leadership and you want an agile workforce, everything around you from an ecosystem perspective needs to change. So one of my favorite examples is how HR forms policies around how people are rewarded and recognized. Okay? Earlier, especially when it comes to the global capability centers or GCCs, it used to be standard set of metrics. You come to the office, you're doing your 9 hours of work or 10 hours, depending on whatever is the time period. You're able to hit your targets in terms of depending on whatever field you are in. And life is hunky-dory, so you get paid on that basis, you get recognized on that basis, and so on. Not to say that that will get substituted, that needs to be there. But I think the whole recognition ecosystem needs to be more about the fact that are people wanting to innovate more? Are people ready to give their creative ideas? And are they ready to come forward and suggest changes? Or are they ready to come up with solutions which might help to actually overcome some of the impact of the changes which is taking place? So I think the whole fabric of how people get recognized and the fabric in terms of how that also leads to their promotions or for that matter of fact their entire yearly increments and so on needs to undergo a change on that particular basis. And the same thing is around different areas about how leaders are also looking at their teams, evaluating their teams and working with their teams. So I think this entire infrastructure in itself is going to play a big, big role in itself. So once again, to summarize, if one has to travel the path of agile leadership, it's going to be a lot about how can you develop yourself, how can you develop your teams, how can you have the ability to be able to communicate in an effective manner? So is the organizational leaders and is the organization themselves giving you the right type of platform to enable communication in an effective manner? And then more importantly, do you have the right type of infrastructure? Is the organization investing in terms of the way the HR practices work, in the way some of the practices of like many people in the workforce today, they don't want to go to office every day. They want to spend some days at home and work from home, some days in office. So that's a big question which a lot of organizations are grappling with. How do you keep that balance on work, life, and everything around that? And so these are the things which need to be constantly reviewed depending upon the organization and the type of business they are in and how that needs to be sort of implemented across the board. But if organizations are able to crack some of it, I think they will be poised for a better future. Because at the end of the day, if the leaders of the organizations are agile, and which means the organization itself is agile, it does a lot of things, right? It does in terms of the benefit. It supports the GCC cause because we as a country don't want to be termed as a country which can provide only cheap labor. We want to be termed, and I think we already covered a great distance on that front, where we want to be termed as a country which has really, really bright workforce and which can actually work hand in hand with global organizations to really do things which matter the most to the organization. Be it in terms of supporting them on the data side, be it in terms of supporting them for launching new products and services more efficiently and more faster, and so on and so forth. So I think that part of it is very, very critical. The other thing is about, again, the workforce. I think organizations which can provide this type of platform where, as I said, while compensation matters, but people feel more connected because the leaders are humble, they are down to earth, and at the same time, the organization itself is providing you opportunities for learning, makes a big, big and a huge difference in itself also. So those are few benefits, and I think it's a journey which many, many organizations have started covering. But again, I think we just still touched the tip of the iceberg, as one calls it. I think there's change which is happening constantly, And I think we need to be ready that the next few years, it's going to be all about how we are able to work together and how we are able to learn together. I can bet you that whatever you're learning in your MBA first year, because many of you are students here, probably will be good, but will not be very, very relevant 2 years down the line. And that's not because of anything to do with the institute or the thing. It's just because things are changing so drastically. But what the institute probably is providing you is a mindset of learning. And that's the mindset that you need to carry forward. And if you have that, that's probably going to distinguish you from many others who are going to be working in the organization. And that's probably going to also distinguish, I think, well-performing organizations in the longer run versus average, mediocre organizations. So that's my bit about this entire topic. I hope you find it to be useful. And yeah, if you have any questions, happy to take that. Or otherwise, I'm available. Feel free to reach out to me after the session any point of time. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions, or we are good to take it up afterwards? Okay, I don't see any raise of hands, so thanks once again for the patient listening. And as I said, I also stay in Pune, so I'll be heading out around 2:33 in the afternoon. But before that, I'm available, so if I could be of any help or clarify anything to any one of you, feel free to reach out. But thanks for the patience listening. Thank you. Thanks.